Hello, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about Microsoft Project. We're going to be looking at the views, getting started, and then we're going to jump into defining the project. My name is Amanda Coleman. I am the operations manager here at Intigent. I have been working in the project management industry and with Microsoft Project for more than 6 years now. I have worked with many organizations to help implement and train and support users of Microsoft Project, Project Server, or Project Online. I do have a couple of certifications in managing projects and portfolios with Microsoft PPM and Microsoft Project 2013, 2016, and managing SharePoint 2016. And I still use Microsoft Project on a day-to-day basis to manage our schedules, to keep track of them for our ongoing projects. So I am still a very, very big user of the tool as well and have encountered probably several of the same pain points that you are encountering. So today is the first part of our series, our webinar series. It is about project essentials, and it is going to walk through all of the different steps and the best practices that we recommend, all the way from today, what we're going to be talking about today, getting started and defining your project. Then we're going to look at task planning, which is a two-part webinar. It talks a lot about how to organize your tasks, about your work breakdown structure. Then we are going to look at resource planning, how to put the users, the work, the people who are going to be doing the tasks. Then we're going to look at assignments planning, project execution, project reporting, and then our final webinar will be about adding custom fields and looking at a couple of other options in your Microsoft Project client. And as you can see today, we're doing modules 1 and 2, which is getting started and defining the project. So today we're going to do a little bit overview about who we are, who is Intigent, what do we do, and then we're going to jump into the two sections that we're focusing on here today. The getting started, we're going to look at the interface, the views, the ribbons, the reports, all of that stuff that will help you navigate as you build and execute your project and doing the day-to-day management. What views are good, what are you going to use them for? And then we're going to look at defining your project. You have all of your options set up. You are ready to go. Now what? How to create your project. There are a couple of different ways that you can do that, different templates you can use. How to set your project start date. Look at the project summary task, scheduling mode, and then setting your project calendar. So Intigent is a consulting firm whose primary focus is Microsoft Project, Project Server, and Project Online. We also have experience are expanding into SharePoint and Dynamics, but our core has always been Project Server. We implement on it, we train people how to use it, we help people build or update their PMO, anything that has to do with project management, we can help you do that. We can support you, we can walk you through the process, we can even do it for you. So we look at how to look at your process and the tool that you have and how to pair the two together in a way that makes the most sense. As you can see, we are Microsoft Gold Partner certified in project and portfolio management. That means that we have several people on staff who have passed exams, qualified to be recognized by Microsoft as being a gold partner, which is the highest partner level you can get. And we are also a part of the Project Management Institute, and a lot of our training classes, our full day courses, do offer PDUs for those. So we'd be happy to give you more information on what classes we do offer if you're interested in those. So now we're going to jump right into our getting started with Microsoft project. We're going to look a lot at the project interface. I'm going to go through a series of slides, and then I'm going to pull up Microsoft Project Client and do some demonstrations about the different views you can use and how to navigate around the tool. So the very first thing you'll be brought to when you open up Microsoft Project is the Start screen. You'll either see the Start screen you see in the menu here, or you'll see a blank project. It depends on your settings, but either one will get you to a place where you can easily navigate from there. On the Start screen here is where you can open your projects. You can open any that you have existing. You can create a new one, either from a template or a new plan. And it gives you several options there on the left that we'll look a little deeper into in just a few minutes. So when you're on the project screen, on your new project screen or existing project screen, these are the most commonly used commands up at the top. You have, as you see, your quick access toolbar up in the upper left-hand corner. This is where you have an interface of tools that are your favorites, the ones that you go to most frequently. And if you have those that you go to repeatedly, you can customize that quick access toolbar to add or remove your commands there. Makes it easy. By default, there is save, undo, and redo, but you can add others. If you are in Project Online, you can add your publish button. If you are frequently marking things 100% complete, you can put that up there. So we'll look at how to customize that as well. You have a tell me box, which is a pretty standard Microsoft feature, which is your search box, which is you can say, I'm not sure what to do here. So you can type in there what you're looking for, and it will pull up a couple of articles, just quick instructions, documents, and things like that. The ribbon here, you can see there's several different ribbons, right? This example here is highlighted on the task ribbon, but there is the file ribbon, task, resource, report, project view, and then you have a format ribbon, which will change depending on your view. These are the different ways that Microsoft Project groups the commands based on relevance. So as you can imagine, the task ribbon will focus on task commands, the resource ribbon will focus on resource commands, and so on. It just helps organize the commands so that you can quickly navigate where you need to go. The groups of related commands are a subpart of the ribbon, and they help organize. They help quickly say, you could say on the task ribbon in the schedule section, here is where you can mark the percent complete for your tasks. Then you have your little screen tips. You hover over any one of those commands, those buttons, and it'll give you a quick tip about what it is and kind of a little explanation. So once you're actually in project, on your project, the most popular view and actually the default is the Gantt chart view, which is the one that's displayed here. You have your view label over on the left. It's a Gantt chart, it's up and down. That's how you can see which view you're on. You can also change it there. Just view label. And then you have your active view, which is where you're currently selected. So in this view, you have a table on one side and the Gantt chart on the right. It has the time scale there for you, and that's considered your active view. That will actually dictate what format commands you get up there in the ribbon. Whatever you're selected on, it'll give you a fresh set of commands based on that option. Down in the bottom left, it is a status bar. It tells you if your project is ready to be worked on, if it's ready to go, how your new tasks are going to be scheduled. We'll talk a little bit more about manual schedule tasks versus automatic schedule tasks a little bit later. You have on the right-hand side some shortcuts to quick, frequently used views in Microsoft Project. And then even next to that, you have a zoom slider, which is where you can zoom in or out on that Gantt chart on the right-hand side, depending on the level of granularity that you want to see. The Backstage view, which is when you click File, that set of options right there, mine actually updated, so it's slightly different than what is seen here. But what this shows you is the different options and customizations that you can do that will apply to either your entire plan or your entire Microsoft Project client itself. We're going to dig a lot into project options in a little while, but you have several different ones there. So you have the info command up at the top, which gives you access to the organizer, which is a feature that you can use to customize views or filters or anything you frequently use and store it in your version of project. You can create your own view, save it, and you put it in the organizer, which makes it available among all of the project plans that you like, that you use your project of client for, your desktop client for. The info page also displays information about what plan you currently have open, like the start date, the finish date, the statistics of your plan, and a couple of other properties. New is where, as you can imagine, it creates a brand new plan, either from blank plan, a template, several different options. And then you have open, save as, and close, which are all pretty standard file management commands that are in a lot of the other Microsoft applications. You have print as well, which has your options for printing the current plan that you have open, which will print whatever you have in your current view. So if you only want to print a few columns, then you should hide those columns and then print your page from there. Then you have the share feature. which includes options for Microsoft SharePoint synchronization, and you can attach a plan, email it. You have export, if you need to export a copy of your plan into PDF or XML formats. There are a couple of other options there for exporting, but those are by far the most popular. And then you have the account page, which displays the connected services. If you are connected to Project Online, for example, that is where you will be able to look at your account there. And it will also show you your sign-in information. The options, which we will go into in a lot more detail, which is where you can set the options for your project client as a whole. There are several options that you want to set up before you start managing your project in Microsoft Project, before you start managing your schedule there, as it will impact the way your schedule will flow. So you want to make sure you get in there and that you set that up appropriately from the very beginning before you even start. So the next most prominent part of Microsoft Project is the project ribbons. The project ribbons span across the top of your micro project client, and they will group according to the organization, the way that it makes sense to your client. For example, here you have the task ribbon, which includes commands for adding, formatting, organizing your tasks. It also includes updating the percent complete for your tasks as you go through managing your project. Then you have the resource ribbon, which is how you add resources to your plan, how you assign them, how you manage them. Next, you have your report tab, which has commands for specifically for reports. It has a couple of different options by default, which we'll look at. It has a burn down report, a project overview report, and that's where you can get to those default reports and you can customize them as well. Next to that is the project ribbon. This is where there are commands that apply to the entire project, such as the project calendar or your project's working time or project information such as start date. And that's where you find those information. And then you have your view tab, which controls what you see in your project window. We just saw a screenshot of the Gantt chart view. The view tab is where you can navigate and change those views. You can also do some filtering, some groupings, some highlighting. We'll look at that. And then the format tab all the way to the right is one that will change depending on what you have selected in your active view. So if you have a Gantt chart selected, you get the Gantt chart tools like you see in the screenshot here. If you look at a timeline, you have a timeline view toolbar, format toolbar, and that's what you'll see above that ribbon as well. So one of the most important things that you should do before you even start your project schedule is set up your project options. There are a lot of options here that will dictate or determine how your projects and tasks will get set up and scheduled once you begin managing your schedule on a day-to-day basis. We're going to look a lot at the project options. I'm going to pull up my client here and open up options and kind of walk through those. What's most important. But the most important options to set here are your working times and your task mode, whether it's manual or automatic, which we'll go into a little more detail, and your task type, and some of the just default display options for your personal Microsoft client desktop. So now I'm going to pull up my version of project. I do have a sample project up here with some tasks and some milestones to show you how everything will look here. And so the first thing we're going to look at is the Backstage. So we're going to click on File over here, and your Backstage options or your options on the left may look a little bit different from mine. My client just got an update, and it put my account and options feature down here at the bottom where previously they were up. So it may look a little different, but you should have all of the same options that I do here. And each one of these will give you a quick run through. You have your home here, which is where you can pin projects, recent ones you work on. No matter where they're stored, you can pin them here to easily get them. You have your new, which gives you templates. We'll look at this when we get into actually creating our project in a little while. Open, which is where you'll often see your recent projects here, your cached versions, one that you've opened pretty recently. They'll show up there. And then here you can have your own folders. If you're connected to any kind of shared drives, they may display here. The Info tab will show you some of the information about your current project schedule that you have open. If you are connected or going to be connected to a project server or project online, you'll see a manage account section here. I'm not currently connected. I'm just working off my local version here. And this icon down here below will point you to the organizer, which is where if you have any views or reports or anything repeatable that you would like available in your other schedules, you can save it to your organizer and it'll be available only in your project client here, but it'll be available for you to reuse as you need to. Save will save, save as. The print option here will print whatever you see on your screen. So whatever you have displayed. So if you want to hide some columns before you print, if you only want to share certain parts of your project schedule, you can just hide them from whatever your current view is and hit print, and it'll show you, give you a preview here of what you're going to be seeing with a little legend down here. So you can easily see what it is. If you do have multiple pages, it will keep having to scroll because there will be a Gantt chart eventually with that as well. So we're going to be looking a lot at the ribbons today. We're going to just talk high level about these. As I mentioned, this is part of our webinar series. So today we're just going to talk a lot about setting up your project and how to define it from the very beginning. And then in different webinars as we go through, we'll focus a lot more on these ribbons individually. So the task ribbon here does focus on tasks. It's where you can create new tasks. As you can see over here, there's different types you can create. You can update the task's progress as you begin managing your project, and a couple of other commands like that. They're all task centric. The resource view here, similar. It's only resource tasks. This is where you can look at your project, and you can assign your resources from this ribbon. You can look at a couple of different resource-centric views here as well. You can work on leveling your resources. The report will look at this as well. We are going to look at some of the out-of-the-box reports and how to customize them, because there are several really, really good out-of-the-box reports, which we usually recommend you start with, and then you can decide what pieces of that you'd like and you want to keep, or what you want to customize, what you want to change, depending on what your organization is looking for getting. The project ribbon here is where we're going to spend a bit of our time today, which is talking about setting up your project information, setting your start date, working on your project calendar, and a couple of other pieces of metadata about your specific project. The View tab here as well, we're gonna dive into a little bit more. This will help you organize your information. You can view, you can highlight, you can group according to things that are important to what you're looking for. And then, as I mentioned, this format ribbon here is specific to the view you have available. So I'm in my Gantt chart view right now, so I have Gantt chart tools up above, but I do have my timeline displayed. So if I click in there, it will display my timeline tools format bar up at the top. So we're going to look in our project options. So we're going to go to File and go to Options. I'm going to run through several of the options here that you should look at setting up before you start your project. So we're in the General tab here. The main thing to look at here is your default view. If a different view is more of a day-to-day interest to you than the Gantt chart view, you can just select it here. I like the Gantt chart view, but you can change it to be whatever your preference is, as well as your date format. Depends on what kind of information you want to see. If you want to see it down by the minute, you have the option to do that, or just your different formats here. Down at this option here, you can choose whether or not you want when project loads to show you that start screen by default. Otherwise, it will open to a blank project schedule. The display options here, I do always recommend going through the options if you'd like to, but these are the ones that we recommend taking a look at. Maybe it's a preference for you that you'd like to change. This one here, you have the option for an entry bar. The entry bar is this bar right here, which is where if you have something selected, you can click straight in there and you can type it. It is available in Excel and a couple of other Microsoft features, but I like to have that enabled. It allows me to quickly edit my task names, for example. So I usually have that one selected. I believe it's off by default. The schedule tab here, which is where we want to pay a lot of attention when setting up your schedule. Here are your calendar options. This will tell Microsoft Project when to schedule your tasks. So if you work anything other than a standard 8-hour per day, 40 hours per week work week, then you want to make sure that you update this accordingly so that project will accurately schedule your tasks. You can just make the change here. You're depending on your start time and your end time, your hours per day. Say if it's 6 hours per day that you want to have Microsoft schedule for you, you can update that here. If you do make any changes to your calendar options, by default, it will only make them to the plan you have open. So you have that flexibility as well if maybe each of your projects have a different calendar. But to set it as your default for all projects, you want to make sure you change this for any setting. You can see they keep going down. They're automatically by this plan, but you can update it to say for all of my projects. So even when you close project all the way and you open it back up, these settings will remain intact. Also down here in the scheduling options, again, it's for one product specifically, so we'll want to make sure we change that if you're updating any options. Here is where it tells you the scheduling mode. So you either have the option to have automatic scheduling or manual scheduling. Automatic scheduling is by far what we recommend. It allows project to give you the most dynamic schedule. You can add hours or days to your tasks, and you can link them. And then automatically scheduling will have the rest of the plan calculate accordingly. So if you make a change to task 2, it'll update 3, 4, and 5 as long as there's those relationships. If you have a manually scheduled task, those kind of links won't happen. You'll have to go in, you'll have to update manually, hence the name, any of the hours, duration for that task in particular. The task type here as well is something to pay attention to. Depending on what your organization is most looking at, I'd recommend this either be fixed work or fixed duration. Work is the amount of effort it will take for your people to do the tasks. So if I am giving a task to Joe for 8 hours, I need it to take 8 hours, whether that's over 1 day or 2 days. If that's the case, I would stick fixed work as my default type, which, as you can see, is my favorite one. It's my default. If you are more focused on the time, the duration, I need this task to take 2 days, no matter the number of hours it's going to take for my people to do the work, then I would switch this change to duration. So any new tasks that you have, it'll look at that duration first, and that is what will stay constant no matter what else you change in your tasks. We will talk a lot more about both auto and manual scheduled and task type as we get into the tasks planning section, which I believe is in two weeks. It is a two-parter. It is a long webinar. So it's in 2 weeks. I believe that's it for the rest of these options here that we're going to look at today. Proofing, we'll leave that one as it is. And the save here, one of the things I like to point out since Microsoft implemented the autosave is that Microsoft Project will do the autosave for you too. I turn mine off personally because when you do hit that undo button, it'll only go back into the last save. So if you have it set to save every 10 minutes and you want to go back even longer than that, it might not let you do that. It'll only let you go back to that last auto-saved version. So, but if you do want to have that on, you can update the minutes, and there's a couple of different options here that you can set for that. You have an option to choose where you're going to save your own templates. If you create a schedule that you really like, you want to reuse it, it has a lot of repeatable parts and processes, then you can save that template to use over and over again in your version of project. So here's where you will set where you'd like that to be. So I have mine set to my desktop here, but you can update yours wherever you'd like to save it. You just click browse and select your location. And the cache down here is kind of important because it is where it has your locally saved version of the project. The cache size varies, this number here. There's no real rhyme or reason for why that is the number it is. Microsoft sets that. But you have these two options down here below. Mine are grayed out because I just cleaned up my cache. It's if the project that you have open is slightly different than the last saved version, it sometimes will give you an error. And what you'll want to do in those cases is come in here and clean up your project cache. So it will refresh with the most recently saved version of your project schedule. We're going to skip over language. That's where you can update the language. And then here we have advanced. Here's where you can, if you'd like to set a couple of different rates for your resources that you want to have by default. If most of your resources are $100 an hour, then you can come in here and have that be the default. It doesn't mean you can't change it when you add different resources, it just means that's what'll show up when you add a new resource to your project. Down here are some options for how you want to edit your project. I like to leave these as defaults, but you can kind of modify how you want to move around in your own version of client project. And the one feature here in this section that I would really recommend, and we'll talk a little bit more about it as well, is updating in the display options. Again, we want to make sure that says all new projects, is this project summary task button right here. The project summary task is line 0 for your plan. It's off by default, but it is the highest level of your plan. It will roll up all of the tasks underneath it into one line. It has start date, finish date, the total work, the total duration for your project, all in one line. So it's something that you don't touch, you don't change, but it gives you that quick look at what's going on in your project as a whole. I do always recommend that you have that turned on. You can turn it off, on in your ribbons as well. The last option we're going to talk about here today is your quick access toolbar. Here is where you can add commands that you frequently use. Mine are over here on the right. I have save, undo, redo, which are the defaults, and I also include publish because I do connect to a product online environment where I need to publish my projects. But if you have some other commands that you use a lot, like you frequently mark your tasks as 100% complete, you can update that and put it over here as well. You can go through. There's a lot of options here to choose from. So you'll just look at over here, and then you can add them, and it'll automatically update this quick access toolbar, which is in the upper left-hand corner. So we're going to look at, oops, that's not where we're supposed to start from. We're going to look at the views now. We're going to look at some of the very popular views that are used, and kind of some of the situations in when you might use those and how to navigate through those. So when you have your project schedule, you work with the data most frequently in views. There are task-centric views, which focus on task information as the primary, and then there are resource views. There are several others in between, but those are the two most frequent ones that I know I use on a daily basis. In these, you can have different tables if you're looking at cost information or work information that you can use to be displayed with those. You also have different groupings and filterings just out of the box that you can use to help organize your information or put it in a way that makes sense for you to view it and see it. So project does contain several of these by default. Most people have their favorite that they work on often, or you can have even a split view where you're doing two different things at once. I'm going to show you how to do that. And views are how you enter your data, how you analyze it, how you display it. And it can be very personal. However you want to see it, it can be different, definitely different from person to person, depending on your project management style. This view here is the Gantt chart view. It is the most common, it is the default, and it gives you a place to look at both the details for your project, the tasks, the start date, the duration date for those. And then over on the right, you do have that timescale option where you can see, it does put the graphics of how your tasks are related together, and it gives you a time scale of what's going on in your project. This view is real useful for entering your task details, fine-tuning it, and even for analyzing it once you're in execution mode and your project's being managed on a day-to-day basis. This view is a resource sheet. This is one of the sheet views. It just has a table. It looks similar to Excel, and there's no time phase data. The resource sheet here is devoted to displaying you details about your resources in your project. It has a row and column kind of format, one resource per row with all of the metadata going across from there. So what the resource sheet does tell you is about your resources. What it doesn't tell you much about is how those resources relate to the tasks that they're assigned to, if they're assigned to any. There is a different view, which is the resource usage view that we're going to use for that. And here is the resource usage view. This shows you the assignments organized by your resource. Where we are going to do a little bit of demonstration and get a little bit hands-on with these different views after we have the explanation here. So here is resource usage. And you do have a time scale over on the right. It is different than the Gantt kind of view. It gives you actual numbers. But you can see in this picture here, you have Glenn Johnson in row number 2. And then under him, you can see all of the tasks that he's assigned to. And the time scale is by months, but you can go even as granular or as broader as your project plan is, depending on how long it lasts, to see when that task is scheduled to occur per resource. Similar to the resource sheet view, this view is the task sheet, and it shows you details about the tasks in your project. This one does have the resource names over there on the right-hand side, you can see, but it does not have a time scale, and it does have the same table feel, the row to column format where you can see, the task and then the detailed information for that task next to it. The task usage view is one of my favorite views to use because it will show you the tasks first, and then this is not a screenshot of the task usage view. I apologize. It shows you the tasks up on top, and then underneath it, it'll show you the resources that have been assigned to it. So similar to the resource usage view, this one just focuses on the task first. A split view is where you can see two different views at one time. The most frequent use of this is if you have your Gantt chart above. Just an example here, you can see your product as a whole, and below is the task form, whichever task you have selected is the details that will display below it. In that task form box, you can view information about cost, work, predecessor, successor relationships between your tasks. You can also assign resources and adjust the amount of work that you want each one to do. I love the task form view. I think it's very, very functional, and it gives you a level of control over your task scheduling that just kind of entering in the time might not give you. The timeline view is a very good way of seeing the big picture of your plan. It is blank by default, and I believe it's not displayed by default, but I toggle it on and off so much I can't remember. But it does give you a way to display what's going on in your plan at a high level. There is a copy feature here where you can put it in a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation, an email presentation, some way for you to convey the status of your project with other people. Because you can also pick and choose what you do show here. So you want to show phases, for example, or milestones. You can create a timeline that incorporates that information to share with your stakeholders. We're going to go back into our sample project here. The first view we're going to look at, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my timeline view here. We're going to look at that in just a moment. So here is a Gantt chart view. Again, this gives you your table information over on the left, and then you have your Gantt chart, which is your time scale over on the right. If you need to modify a field here, for example, I believe duration is only shown by default. You want to add in work because you're really focused on, I need Joe to work 8 hours on this task. You can just right click, add in a column. It's the work column, and it'll add that column in here. You can real customize whatever you want to see based on what's important to your organization. You can move the slider bar here to zoom in and out. If I want to look at my tail scar, I'm going to move my bar over here so I can see more of my Gantt chart. I can scroll like this. I can zoom in and out on my Gantt chart here if I want to look at a little bit more detail where things are scheduled to take place. This means a lot more scrolling, but it can give you very granular data. The Gantt chart view is also very helpful for looking at your tasks in an organized way. In the view ribbon up here, there is this highlight, filter, and group section. And I use this a lot, particularly when looking at my milestones, which project identifies as any task with a 0-day duration. I like to use my highlighting specifically for that. I'm gonna go ahead and click on that. And you can see there are several built-in highlighting filters that are available for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on my milestones one. And what it will do is it will just highlight any of the milestones that I want to see here. Very good for that quick look kind of a feel. There are a couple others here that are there by default. If you're looking at your critical path, you can display that, estimated durations, that kind of a thing. Milestones is my favorite. I'll go ahead and clear my highlighting here. And in a similar way, you can filter your project. You can have your milestones as well. For example, if you want to print the Gantt chart that just shows your milestones, what you can do is you can come in here and filter, and it'll filter out your tasks and show you only those milestones. And you can print it from here. You can get that quick, what information do you want to see kind of a feel, and share that with your stakeholders. Go ahead and clear my filter. And in a similar way, you can group group your tasks. If you want to look at an active versus active, for example, I don't use the grouping so much. I use the filter and highlighting, but you do have the option if you have several tasks that are going to group in a similar fashion, different than what you've laid out in your schedule. So I'm going to change my views to the resource sheet, and Microsoft Project gives you many, many ways to do this. I do have my view label over here on the left. I can right click, gives you some of the most popular views. You can go to more views if you want to see that here. You could do a drop down here, since this is on the, and here's my resource view, my team planner view. Here's my resource sheet view. We can get there that way. We can also get there from the resource ribbon, but I prefer to do the right click here, like resource sheet, and it'll change my view. So the resource sheet view does give you the information just about the resources on your project. It gives you some of the data points at a high level of what you want to see here. It gives you the type that they are. There are 3 types in Microsoft Project. There is a work resource, which are usually the people that are going to be doing it. It can either be a role, such as project manager, or a named person, such as Daniel Shackelford. You have a cost resource, which is a resource that does not have any work associated with it, but it does have a cost. For example, travel. I'm not going to enter in the number of hours that travel is going to get unless you want to, but that's not a cost resource. But I can enter in a value for that. I can say it was $2,000 for my travel, and I can enter that in so I can keep a good grasp on my cost for my project. And then there is a material resource. These are resources that have a cost per use. So an example of that would be concrete or reams of paper, where you need to keep track of, I used 5 units of concrete at a cost of $1,000. And you can use that in project assigned to your tasks to help calculate the cost associated with that. And there are other data points here that you can look and see. You can look at the rates associated with them and several other data points here. You can also update them here if a change needs to be made. This is where you would make that change. We're going to switch to our resource usage view here. Oops, let me scroll up a little bit. And this will tell me a little bit more information about how my resources and my tasks are interacting together. I'm going to collapse my unassigned here. And I'm going to look down here at Daniel's task. He has a task. He's assigned to the secure core resources task. And I can see a couple of data points here. I'm going to go to my to a different table here, my usage table here. This is the default view here. And it tells me just the name of the task, and it tells me the work that he's been assigned. By default, this time phase view over here will take you to the current week. And in the task ribbon up here, you can scroll to task, and it will automatically shift that time scale to be when that task is supposed to take place. So I can scroll down to any of these that I don't see, scroll to task, and oops, that was a cost resource, and it'll automatically update my time scale accordingly. I can also zoom in and out. By default, the granularity is days, but if I want to see it by weeks or by hours, I can just zoom in or out. This is by the week, and it can go as broad as, I believe, a full year, and then as granular as every 2 hours. So it is entirely a preference on what you want to see. You can also apply different tables here. Since this is a resource-based view, if I'm interested in seeing the cost for those resources, what is it costing me to have Brad Thor on my project, I can come to my view tab up here, my view ribbon, and there's a table section here. And there are several built in that give me that high level information I'm looking for. There is cost, work, and summary, and usage, which are the most frequently used ones. I'm gonna go ahead and change mine to be cost. And it gives me a lot of data points about the costs associated with these resources. I can see for him at a resource level, what is he costing me to be on my project? I can see at a task level specifically for determined project scope, he is going to cost me $400 to use just based on the rate I've set up for him in my project schedule. We're going to look at our task views now. We're going to look at our task sheet first. Right click, we're going to go to task sheet. And this looks similar to a Gantt, except it doesn't have that time phase, but it is focused on task information. It gives you here and then some data points about that, such as the start date, finish date for that task, some predecessors, and And again, you can add your columns to display what information is relevant to you. The task usage view, we'll just spend a couple of minutes here, will group your information based on the task. So instead of it based on resource, you'll see it from a task. So we'll see, for example, on task row 3 for determine project scope, I have 3 resources associated with it. I have Brad Thor, I have architect, and I have travel. I do have my time scales over here on the right. Again, if it's not showing up here in my view, I can click on task and I can scroll to task to kind of center that up if I really want to kind of hone in on where that's at. I can apply a different table. Again, if I'm interested, how much is determined project scope going to cost me based on what I've put in, I can switch to my view ribbon and apply the cost table to it, just like we did to the resource usage view. And it'll give me that information just all right here. It'll say that this task is going to cost me $3,500 to do, and here's my breakdown of how that's going to be. I'm going to switch back to my Gantt chart view. I'm going to go ahead and use my button this time. So once I'm in my Gantt chart view, I mentioned that there was a split view that you can have. You can see the task information down below while you have Gantt chart up top. It does give you a lot of flexibility on how you manage your information. So with my Gantt chart view displayed, I'm in my view ribbon. All the way over here, almost all the way to the right is the details. Just by selecting it by default, the task form will populate. You can update which view you'd like to see. You have a couple of different options, but the task form is the default that will show up for you here. There are different there are all different tables that you can apply here based on what you want to see. Similar to almost any of those sheet views, you can update it, and it's just a different way to show you the same information. So right here, I'm looking at work. I can tell it gives me, because I have determined project scope selected, I have my task name here, the start and finish date, some of the metadata points specifically about this task, as well as the resources assigned to them. How much work they're going to be, how much work they've put to the task, how much remaining work that they have. To change the information that's shown here, for example, if you're looking at cost, I know I keep using that as an example. It's one of the most popular requests that we get. I can just right click over here and all this gray space, and I'm just going to go ahead and click cost, and it'll update that. It's the same information it showed me on a cost table, but now I can see it in conjunction with the rest of my project plan. I can just scroll through, and now I'm looking at the secure project sponsorship task. I can scroll through the rest of them, and it'll show me those data points just immediately as I shift through. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my details view to collapse it. Don't need to see that right now anymore. And now we're going to look at the timeline view. As I mentioned, this is a very, very handy way to see your project information at a high level, a big picture kind of a look. So instead of checking that details in my view ribbon, I'm going to select timeline. And I already do have a timeline created for my project here. As you can see, I put some of my summary tasks, which are my bold tasks that has all of the subtasks underneath it. It's just a roll up of all of the tasks underneath it. I've put my summary tasks in here. A lot of times these are your stages or your phases for your project, and you can put them up here to show, to management, my scope phase is going to go from June 28th to July 3rd. And so on. So from here, after you displayed your timeline, I'm going to select it. So it's my active view. I do get this timeline tool section up here. These commands are very specific to the timeline view. And it'll, here's where your timeline commands, I suppose. And I'm going to go ahead and remove some of my tasks here so we can walk through how to do this together. So I'm going to go ahead and just remove them. It's a similar process to remove them and to add them. And that one too. So by default, you will have just one timeline. It will be blank, and any tasks you apply to it usually are in a light blue color unless you change it. I'm going to go through and I'm going to update my timeline. I'm going to add my summary tasks back to it. I can right click here and choose add to timeline, which is the quickest way. I can click directly in here and say add an existing task. And I have an option to go ahead and choose analysis and design. So I can add them both at one time. And since I had them on here before, they are colored, but you can change the color if you'd like. It does give it that pop of color instead of them all being the same. You can choose whatever you'd like to display. And then this font section becomes enabled for you. And I'm going to change this one to orangey gold, and so on. So I can update that to show however I'd like it to be. And from here, I can copy my timeline to share presentation, PowerPoint by clicking on this copy timeline button up here. I usually do it full size or for email, and then you can just paste it wherever you need it to go, and it'll copy it exactly as you show it here. You do also have the option to create a second timeline. This is kind of a newer feature, so if you have an older version of project, you might not have this option available to you yet, but you do have the option here in the insert section to do a new timeline bar. So I'm going to select this here. So if you have your phases in one, another key point that you might want to display is your milestones, which again are anything with a 0-day duration. So I'm going to look, I have a scope complete milestone. I'm going to go ahead and right click. I'm going to add it. It added to my second timeline down here because that's what I had selected. If I had this top one selected, it would have added it there, but I had my second one, so it's going to add it here. So I'm going to go ahead and add my other milestones to it. Add timeline, my design complete. And now I can choose to share this milestone as well. I'll use the same copy timeline, whichever one is active as I mentioned. You'll be able to copy that from there. So I'm going to go back to my view. I'm going to go ahead and hide my timeline view again. Now we're going to look at the out-of-the-box reports that are in Microsoft Project. The built-in reports are a way for you to convey the information about your plan. How is it doing? What does it look like? Where is it going? This is a way for you to do that, especially as you begin the day-to-day managing of your projects. It's really, really good in comparing where did I start to where am I right now. You can include some of the very visual elements, such as the charts and the tables and the images. You can include those in your reports as well. And you can view them in project, or you can print them however you need to share those reports. There are several options for you to do that. Similar to the timeline, you can copy and paste them into other programs like PowerPoint or emails or however you share your information. This is an example of the resource overview report, and it's one that we will look at here in just a minute. And this is exactly as it sounds. It gives you an overview of your resources. When you first click into it, you can click on any of the elements in your report, and it will pull up the fields list that you see on the right-hand side. This is where it allows you to customize your report that you're seeing. If your organization focuses on duration, then maybe you are more interested in a percent complete versus a percent work complete, which looks at the hours, the effort, the time it's taking to complete the tasks. And the same can be said here. You can choose to display or not display some of the fields that are available by default in project, and there are a lot, so you have many options to choose from. So the format ribbon will change just like it did with the timeline and the active view, the Gantt chart view, whichever view you have displayed. And with the reports, there are a lot of additional toolbars that you get. You get a lot of additional options for that. When you are in the report section, you'll get this top one right here that says design, which is where you can choose your theme for your report, any visualizations you want to add, if you want to copy your report, those kind of things. And then if you have a table selected, you get a different set of tools. Same with a chart, same with a pie graph. With any of those, you'll get a different set here. So you can change colors, you can change the visualization if you want a chart bar, but a different kind than what it shows. You have the options to do that. We're going to go back into our project here. And there is a report ribbon that's devoted entirely for reporting. And there are several reports. I always recommend that we'll look at two of them today, but they always recommend that you go through these on your own and you see before creating your own, are there any of these that I can use 75% of, and that's always a really, really good place to start. So the first one we're going to look at is a product overview report. It is in this dashboard grouping here. There's product overview. As you can see, there are a couple of others here by default, a burn down, a cost overview, upcoming tasks. We're going to click on project overview right here. So my project does not have any actual work on it right now. So there's not a whole lot to show here. There's not a percent complete or anything like that. But what it does show you is that you have a visualization here in the form of this bar. And then you have a section here about your milestones. Anything 0 day in duration will show up here in this table. Right here, there is the percent complete, and it shows you that based on the different phases of my project. I have my project management, scope, analysis, and design. As my project gets going and there's percent complete charged against those tasks, it'll display here, it'll update. So if you have a weekly status report, for example, this would be a great way to show where's my project right now. And also down here below is a late task section. As you can see with these visualizations, when I click into it, I do get this fields list over here. And this is where you have the ability to modify the report. As I mentioned, this is a percent complete for my top level task. So this is going to show me the duration for them based on their percent complete. So if I have a task that is 2 days in duration and it's one day, it's half complete, it'll show it 1 day. If I'm interested in having, say, the percent work complete instead, I can always update that instead. I do need to change my words up here, but what this will now show me is the percent work complete. And I can do that with several of the other fields that are available out of the box from Microsoft Project. There are several here. Same over here. If I'm interested in seeing, not the percent complete, but the percent work complete, then I can update that here. Visualization to not. And some of the other options down here you have available to you. So one of the other reports that we can look at today is the resource overview report, which is if you're interested in seeing how your resources are spending their time or the cost associated with them. So this one here is the resource overview report, which is the same one that we showed in the PowerPoint. You can also click in here and you have the option to manipulate the report. This one here is showing all of the hours per resource. So it's showing me that the project manager has, it looks like about 4 hours of work assigned to it. Brad Thor and architect have by far the most. And it's just a quick look for where your resources are spending their time or where they're planned to spending their time. If I had any actual work, they would populate here on what's been completed on those tasks. And then if you have any status down here, what's the remaining work, just from a quick look over here as well. If I want to look at the report in conjunction with a view, it's very similar to the split view. I can click on view up here and then click either timeline or details. I'm going to do details. So you can see the real-time data down below. And then up at the top, you can see what the report output is going to be based on that. So now that we have done that overview of the project clients, kind of how to navigate what some of the views are used for, we're going to start to define our project. So now we're going to jump into the second part of that. We're going to look at how you can view your information, and all that good stuff. So in this module, we are going to look at creating a project. There are a couple of different options. We're going to look at defining your project, several of the data points you need to do upon project creation, such as the start date. We're going to talk a little bit more about task mode and your project summary task. We're going to look at your project calendar and then your other properties that you can associate. So we're going to look at creating a project and setting the start date. So there are several ways that you can create a new project. There is the most frequent one, which is creating it from a brand new blank template. It does give you kind of a canvas to build it out as you want. There are several predefined templates from Microsoft that you can use. We will take a look at one of those, but you can click on those from your new button and it'll populate that accordingly. You can obviously adjust and edit it, but it does give you a couple of templates by default. And then you can create your project from your own template. So we'll walk through, again, how you define where your templates are going to be saved how you save it as a template, and then how do you access it after it's been saved. So creating a project from a blank project is pretty straightforward. It is the easiest option to do. When you open up project, you click file, you just click new, there is an option for blank project right there. They make it very easy. It's the very first option available, so it's the easiest go-to. Creating it from an available template, you can do this when you do kind of want that preset template, and then you can modify it from there. A lot of times they will have, as you can see here, they have a sprints project, a waterfall project, kind of themes out there. They have some like a project management plan. That's one that I see used a lot because it does give you the bones of a good project and the relationships between them. All you have to do is go in and modify your tasks and resources. And creating a project from your own template. And this is when you have, like I said, created a project that you like. It's pretty robust. It gives you some repeatable processes that you have. It goes through like the longest part of your project you could possibly have. And you can use that as a template over and over again. And so from there, you do have a different tab. Instead of the office tab, you have a personal tab, which is where any of your templates that you have saved will be displayed. I know a lot of industries or organizations have their own processes that they want to or that they have to go through, different stages, different PMI standards for your projects. And so you can create a real solid schedule and then save it to be reused. And so once you do create your project, we're going to look at setting the start date. Since Microsoft Project does focus primarily in time, and it is an active scheduling engine, determining your start date is very important. When you set it, it will automatically do it from today, but you can't update it, which is most common to be, a week out, 2 weeks out, and it'll shift all of their tasks if you have any accordingly. Most should be scheduled from the start date of the project. That is what we recommend too, because it does allow Microsoft Product to do its job. But you can also schedule it from the finish date if you'd like. If you know the finish date for sure, you can plug that in and say, schedule it from the finish date, and it'll do the rest of the tasks accordingly. It'll kind of does a forwards and backwards pass to make sure that it gets all of those in the right place. When you schedule from the start date, all of the tasks are by default set to be as soon as possible. This gives your schedule the greatest flexibility that it can have. It allows it to be super, super dynamic, and that if you have a change to say task three or number 4, it will adjust the rest of your tasks accordingly afterwards. A lot of times what I see is if you have a schedule and you suddenly get down and you say, I have this task and it has to finish on this date. A lot of times what I see is users typing in dates to the start or the finish date because that's the date that they have to have it done. And when you do that, you put a constraint in your project. You are telling project, don't touch this task. And so you aren't allowing product to do its full dynamic scheduling job because you're putting a stake in the ground that says don't touch this task. So maybe it's dynamic task 1, 2, 3, and then it gets to 4 and it can't do anything with it because you're like it has to be done by November 1st. And so anything after that, it's not going to touch. It's not going to update until that task is completed. And I will show you how to see if you have a constraint, how to modify it. I will show you that. So to set your start date, it is in the projects tab. There is an icon called project information, and it will pop up a dialog box such as this one, which is where you can either view or change or set your project start date. It will also tell you what today's date is. It'll tell you where you're scheduling from, which I mentioned start date is our recommendation. And then there's a couple of other detail points below if you've identified those that you want to associate with your project. And to save your plan, it's a pretty straightforward Microsoft commands in the Backstage. You have save, which is if you've already saved it. And if you're saving it for the very first time, you will click Save As. You'll give it a name. You'll just say where you want to save it as, and then just click Save, and it'll save it right there. And if you do have that auto save on, it will save that for you every 10 minutes by default, just to that same location that you identified. The project summary task is the line 0 task. I know we looked at this a little bit earlier, but it is the highest level of your plan, your project plan. It is something that you should never update, never touch, never rename, never associate, but it will give you all of the roll-up information of your tasks. Some projects I have seen are hundreds and hundreds lines long, and it will take a little bit of time to get through all that information and see what's going on. But if you display that project summary task, it will just show you all of that. Quick look, start date, finish date for all your tasks, the work, the duration, how long is it going to be, and it's something that we always recommend you see and you look at, because if any changes happen, it will affect that project summary task and the tasks below it. We did look at the project options earlier, but just as a reminder, you can turn that project summary task to always be on by default. It is in the project options section in advanced. You can just check that button, make sure you flip the switch to say all new projects, but you can turn it on here. Otherwise it will be off by default for all new projects that you have except for the one. If you are in a project and you just want to toggle it on and off, you do have that option as well. And there's the format ribbon. It's almost all the way to the right-hand side. It's just a little checkbox for project summary task. So you can decide to turn it on or off right there to display as well. I'm going to go back to, we're going to go ahead and go to a new project. So we're going to click on File here, and we're just going to go ahead and start from a blank project. I know you probably created from a blank project before, but I have to show it to you. So we're going to go on blank project right here. And as you can imagine, it opens up a blank project with just standard fields. Again, if you need to add any fields here, you can do that. We'll pull up a blank project. Close that one. We'll go ahead and close you too. So now we can open it from one of the predefined Microsoft templates. There is this Office tab up here, and they have a pretty good number of templates here available for you. There is a simple project plan that you can choose. There is a project management institute plan. We're going to go ahead and click on that one, and it will load up here. It'll just give you a little bit of information about it. You know, do you want to go ahead and set the start date? I'm going to go ahead and set it today. You can click create, and it will pre-populate that for you. This one does take you through the PMI process. It's pretty lengthy. It's not that lengthy, it's about 50 lines, but it will go ahead and have those relationships between tasks for you already predefined. So if you want to go ahead and give a good sounding board, you can choose one of these templates to choose from. It does give you a timeline view up here as well, but the milestones and phases are already predefined. I'm going to go ahead and close that one out. And so if, as I mentioned, you have your own process or template that you would like to do and you want to save, I recommend saving a template. If you have repeatable processes, it's definitely worth the time to create a nice solid template that you can reuse. So I'm going to open up that the previous example that I had here. And so I'm going to go ahead and say I have this template ready. I want to go ahead and save it. I don't have any actuals in here, but I have some estimates. I want to reuse this. I'm going to go ahead and go to my options. I'm going to make sure I have defined a place in my Save tab for where my templates are going to go. I can set it up here, your templates folder on your desktop, wherever you want to save it. I want to make sure that I go ahead and click Browse and save a good location for it. So you can see mine's on the desktop. Make sure that's saved. So now it's time to save my plan as a template. I'm going to click on File. I'm going to click on Save As, browse my locations, and I'm going to click on the type right here. This is the most important part about saving a project template, is I'm going to click and I'm going to switch this to say project template right here. And so actually once I do that, it's going to go ahead and update my location to be that default point, that the default place that I pointed it to in my project options. So I'm going to go ahead and do another project template. We're going to call it a super project template because we're very excited. I'm going to go ahead and say super project template and click save. And then it will ask you if there is anything you want to remove. If you are using an actual project that has actual values on it, you have some tasks that are 100% complete, but you want to save a template where they're not there, then you want to go ahead and make sure that you select these values, because these are saying what is the data you want to remove from the template. So usually you want a clean template. don't want any artifacts that you don't necessarily need. So I'm going to go ahead and select all those and then click Save. And you can see up at the top here, it has the name of my template. And instead of being a .mpp, Microsoft Project P, it gives you a template, Microsoft Project template. So you can see right here that you're not actually working on a product, you're working on a template. So go ahead and close this. And now when I come to this personal section here, it will have all of the templates that I have saved to my computer into that saved location, and it'll associate it here. So if you do go into options and save that default location, you won't see them here because it's not going to be pointing to the same place. But I can just go ahead and click on one from here. It'll give me like the similar prompting screen to a Microsoft project template. I'll click create, and here are all my tasks. I already set them up to be. It does save your resources in here as well. If you have the same people who are working on your projects, if you would like to do that, you can do that here as well. So my project summary task is always on by default. I did set that up in my project options. If you would like to toggle it on and off, it is in this format ribbon here. You can just deselect it there. It'll just hide it. It is always there in the background. So if you do want to hide it, but you want to see it sometimes, you do have the option. Just go ahead and turn it on and off. As I mentioned, it's a pretty good idea to go ahead and have that on. And you can see if I do make a change to any of my tasks here, I'm going to change this one to say it's going to be 5 weeks long. Any change that I do make to my plan, you can see all the changes in blue. So all the tasks after it because they're linked, but it also will affect my project summary because it's pushed out my project finish date. So we're going to look at different task modes. You can set this by default, or you can set it at either a task level or the project level between having manual and automatic task scheduling mode. The manually scheduled mode is kind of like a task list. It's a placeholder task you can create. It doesn't affect the rest of your plan because it's not automatically calculating that task in when it performs its scheduling duties. And you can just put it in as a manual task, and then when you know more details about your task, you can go ahead and update that to be automatic, and it'll shuffle it into the mix. There is automatic scheduling, which is when you create them, project will assign them a start date, a duration, a finish date, and calculate the rest of the project in response to any changes, relationships you made in your tasks. We always recommend automatic because it does allow you to take that full advantage of the powerful scheduling engine that is Microsoft Project. So a couple more data points about these two modes. The manually scheduled, it is, as I mentioned, it is kind of like a task list. It's more Excel-based. You can just type it in. You don't really have to give it that much information. Everything just is pretty straightforward for that one task. It is indicated by a little push pin icon, and the Gantt bar is kind of a teal color. So you can have the quick look at the different scheduling modes for your tasks. And then you have automatically scheduled tasks, which is where it'll automatically schedule it for you based on the other data points you've associated with it. It does give you a box with an arrow and then a darker blue bar over on the right-hand side. By default, Project has new tasks set to be manually scheduled. And so you can see down in the bottom left-hand side of your project client how your new tasks are going to be. Every time you add one, it automatically give it a manual or auto-scheduled task type. And so you can see down at the bottom, it says either manual or scheduled. You can change it right there, actually. I'll show you a couple of different ways that you can change the task mode. So you can change it using that status bar in the very bottom left where it does give you that my new tasks will be. You can just click on it right there and you can change the values. That will change it only for that one specific project. It will not change it for all of your projects. You do have the option to change it to be your default across the board, all your projects for now till forever in your project options. I will review how to do that there as well. It's in the schedule tab and you can set that for all your projects. You can also do it just at a task level. Just one task is going to be manual in your project. There is in the task ribbon a section where it identifies what the task mode is. And so you can set that there. So another very important piece to setting up your project, we've looked at options, how to navigate, all that, setting up your project and the start date, is defining your project calendar. The project calendar defines when the standard working and non-working days are. You're working Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It allows product to schedule that. But it will also, there are a couple other default calendars you have. You have your 24 hours calendar. There's no non-working time. You can work around the clock. There are some instances where that calendar may be used, such as if you're using machinery. You have a night shift calendar, and then you have the standard calendar, which is the default one for your project client. Um, Also, for the calendar, you can define any holidays that you want. If you have any changes to your work week, it may not be 8 to 5, but maybe it's 8 to 4. And so you can update that just for one product at a time. So you can change the calendar that you're using or the specifics for that calendar you're using by going into the project tab and going into change working time. It will pull up a dialog box like what is on the right-hand side. And this is how you set what the calendar is going to be most of the time. So you can set, like I mentioned, that normal working schedule. You can set up any exceptions. There may be holidays that you want to incorporate so that when you're scheduling your tasks and you want to get an accurate view, it'll skip over with our next holiday coming up at Thanksgiving. It'll skip over Thanksgiving. It'll skip over some of the other holidays that you want to build into your plan. That way you have that accurate scheduling of when things are going to take place. If there are recurring holidays or time off, such as you get every second Friday off, then you can set that in here as well. And here is in the project options where you can set what that default time will look like. You can set the hours per day, times here. This one will be for your entire project client versus that change working time will be only in that one specific project. You can also enter other information about your project. You can enter in a title, have other properties by going into one of the Backstage features there. It will keep track of several of the properties for you. And you can put in the title, which is when you save your plan, it'll give it that. You can give it a different title. The project manager's name, keywords if you need to search for it. You do also have the option for statistics, so you can see how many times it's been revised right there in the Backstage right there. I'll show you how to get there. So now that we're back in our project schedule, we're going to look at the task mode. We're going to make sure I didn't skip anything here. We're going to look at our task mode here. So you can see down, one of the ways that you can view what your current task mode is by looking down in the bottom left. This is called the status bar. So I have my new task set to be auto-scheduled. I just click on it here and I can choose which option I'd like. I'm going to leave mine as auto-scheduled, and this will set it just for this one project. I can also change it across the board by going to back into my project options, into my schedule tab here. There are scheduling options. I want to make sure that I change this to say all new projects, and then I can update it to always be auto or manual scheduled. If I need to change the scheduling mode only for one task, for example, I can go into the task ribbon up here. And there's a task section right here that gives you the same icons, the little push pin or the darker blue rectangle box. And so I can say I want to switch this one to be manually scheduled. And you can see it does make a couple of changes. It tells you exactly what's changed because of that change that I made to the task mode. And so we're going to look at our project calendar now. So we're going to look at our project ribbon up here. And we're going to go to change working time. This is where you define what the working time is for the most of the time for your project schedule. So you can see here in this project schedule, I have identified a couple of holidays. What you can do to add these is you can just go ahead and add them right in here. You can just type them. New Year's Day, we're going to have off. Go ahead and put the day that I want to update that to be. And then you can see up here that you can look at the different ones and it will highlight in a different color what the exceptions are. You can even see it gives you a little update over here. It says November 24th, it's going to be a regular working day. Here are the times for that. But then November 25th is December 25th is a holiday and it's not going to be a working day. So over here, you can see that identified. If you need to make a change to your default work week, it does have a default option right here, which as I mentioned is that standard 8 to 5. I can click on details over here, and this is where I can change what those default times are going to be. If I want to make a change for maybe on Friday, say we get half days off on Friday, I'm going to say set these days to non-working. It's going to go ahead and clear that out, and it's going to update that to say only 8 to 12. Go ahead and click it. Now I can see on Thursdays, it's a full working day, but on Fridays, I only have a half day. And so any tasks that are on a Friday, there's only 4 hours available for that day. I can modify many at a time if I want to. If I'm going to say my day Monday through Friday is going to be something different, I can just click Monday and then click Shift and then click all the days that I want to update at one time. Click on change these days to specific working times. We're going to go ahead and have these be what do these guys want to work? We're going to do a 1 to 6. We're just going to add in some extra time. And so once I do that, go ahead and do it. And you can see that the working times will schedule it from here on out to be that same way. You can set up a custom work week. Again, as I mentioned, by putting it in here, exceptions, or if you have, you can have a different work week here. If the work week is different, we have a half day all week, you can set that up. And you can also create an entirely brand new calendar. You do have the option up here in the upper right-hand corner for create new calendar. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And you can copy a current calendar. I'm going to go ahead and copy my standard calendar. I'm going to give it a name. A lot of times you'll need different calendars to assign to resources, for example, if you'd like, and maybe based in different locations. So I'm going to go ahead and give this one a Ohio calendar name. Not that their holidays will be that much different, but if you have ones in different countries, you may need different calendars for that. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK here. I'm going to save changes. Yes, I'm going to save changes. And so now I have an additional option here available. I have my Ohio calendar, which has its own, can have its own set of traditional work days, work weeks, exceptions. It stands on its own. So I can have another one here as well. When I click on my project information box here, this is where I can define what calendar this particular project is going to be. Here is where I can set my start date, which is what we did a little while ago. I'm going to say I want my project to start on November 1st. And I want it to use the Ohio calendar I just set. So it's going to use specifically pulling in those working days with my start date to give me the schedule that I'd like to see. As you can see, it did make a couple of changes, did update some things, which I can see in blue. I can see in blue here. So we had talked a little bit earlier about when you schedule your project from the start date, it will schedule all your tasks to be as soon as possible, which does allow for the most dynamic flow of your schedule as you make changes, as it progresses, the percent complete gets updated, and so on. I'm going to enter in a column here called constraint type. So you can see all of them are as soon as possible. That's what we want to see most frequent. But what I do see a lot of is users saying that tasks need to happen on a certain time. So this task is automatically scheduled. It's set to start November 1st. But if I come in and say this task has to start or finish, let's do finish on the 5th, and I type it in straight here, it automatically will generate a constraint for my task. I can tell it gives me an icon over here. It gives me a constraint type of finish no earlier than because I typed in a finish date. And so any changes that I make to the tasks around it will not affect it. The project will not be able to move my project accordingly. So I'm going to go ahead and come in. I'm going to delete that constraint. I do want it to stay as soon as possible, keep it flexible. And you can just modify other pieces of your schedule to make that date happen. So the last thing we're going to look at, and then I will open it up if anybody has any questions, is look at updating the plan properties for the specific plan. So I'm going to click on File. I'm going to go to to info, which it may be by default. And then over here on the right-hand side is project information. I'm going to go ahead and click that, click on some advanced properties here, and it will bring up some properties for the specific project that I have open. Here is where I can give it a title. I can update any of these fields. It won't really affect any of the other pieces of my project plan, but I do have the option here to come and update that. I can see, like I said, some statistics on it. How many times has this schedule been revised? When was the last time it was modified? That kind of a thing. Let's give you a couple other data points here, but the summary and statistics are primarily where you might make some changes here. And so once you have everything updated here, you can go ahead and click OK. Make sure you save your plan so that it stays with it, and then you are all set. So we do have a couple of other upcoming webinars. They are going to be on Thursdays from 1 to 3. Just have to sign up on our website. The next 3 that we have coming up is our tasks planning, which is a 2-part because there's a lot of information to cover. And that will start next Thursday. And then we have the second part of that. And then the following week, we look at resource planning. We do have the rest of the modules coming up, the different webinars coming up. And they'll be posted soon to do the rest of the assignment planning and the different modules I showed you at the beginning. But I appreciate you joining today. If you have any information or if you have any questions as you're going through, you can feel free to email me. I have my email address right there. And you can just send me a quick email. I'd be happy to help.